Some loves don't begin with fireworks. They start in silence, in the ache that follows years of emptiness. They grow from the simplest moments, a glance across the fence, a voice that lingers just a second too long, until one day the air between two people is no longer just air. It's fire, and when that fire finally breaks free, it consumes everything in its path: hesitation, restraint, the years lost to loneliness. Every kiss becomes a lifeline, every touch a rebirth, every breath proof that passion was never truly gone. Only sleeping, here we tell those stories, the ones too intimate for small talk, too raw for fiction, too real to be anything but lived. If you've ever felt the quiet burn of longing, or the wild relief of finally being seen, welcome. You've found your place. The nights had a way of stretching too long, as if time itself had forgotten how to move. The walls seemed to listen, holding every echo of silence, every creak of the floor, every sigh that slipped out without permission. There was no laughter drifting through the rooms anymore, no low hum of conversation after dinner, no warmth to break the chill that settled in like an unwelcome guest. Even the furniture seemed different, colder, harder, less forgiving, as though the years without tenderness had seeped into the wood. Touch had become something distant, like a story told by someone else about another life. Fingers once intertwined in quiet comfort were now just hands, empty and idle. Skin hadn't felt the heat of another's for so long that the memory of it felt almost unreal, like a dream fading in the morning light. The heart still beat, the body still moved, but there was no fire beneath it, just a slow, steady rhythm that carried on without spark. There were moments when the mind wandered back to what it felt like to be wanted, to be seen in a way that made breath catch and time slow. Those memories didn't come often anymore, but when they did, they ached. They lingered just long enough to remind of what had been lost. The bed was wider than it needed to be, sheets cool where they should have been warm, a place for rest that only made the emptiness more pronounced. Evenings had their rituals, tidying the kitchen, folding laundry, maybe a book or a film, but none of it filled the space where connection used to live. The sound of laughter on a television screen felt like a cruel kind of music because it didn't belong to this house anymore. Nights fell heavy, and the quiet pressed in, heavier still. It wasn't just about missing someone's arms. It was about missing the way the world felt when eyes met across a room, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. It was about the simple weight of a hand on a shoulder, the warmth of a presence beside you, the sense of being tethered to another soul in the most ordinary moments. Days turned into months, and months into years, each one leaving behind a layer of dust on the parts of the heart that once burned with heat. The mirror reflected the same face, but the eyes had grown still. There was a kind of survival in it, this way of living without touch, but it was a survival without joy. The nights came and went, and in their quiet shadow, a part of the soul slept on, waiting for something it no longer dared to name. It's a strange thing how a body can grow accustomed to the absence of warmth, and yet still feel its lack in the deepest parts. That quiet ache never fully left. It was always there, like a thread running through each day, pulling softly, a reminder that something essential had been misplaced. And though it was never spoken aloud, the heart knew the truth. It had been too long since it had truly been alive. It started in the simplest way, the kind of moments that pass unnoticed unless you're paying attention. A smile over the fence while pulling weeds, a nod when the mailman came down the street, the easy exchange of good morning, as if it were nothing more than politeness. There was no reason to think those moments mattered, but they stayed. They settled somewhere quietly, without asking permission. The first time our eyes lingered, it was almost accidental, a glance that should have been fleeting, stretched into something more. There was a stillness in it, the kind that makes you forget what you were about to say, the kind that leaves you feeling as though something just shifted, even if you can't name what it is. The air seemed heavier, charged with something unspoken, and for a second, the world around us blurred. After that, small encounters began to feel different, standing a little closer when talking, letting conversations run longer than they needed to, noticing the curve of a smile or the way sunlight caught in hair. Even the air between us felt altered, carrying a tension that was as intoxicating as it was dangerous. It was never rushed. That was part of what made it so unsettling. There was no grand confession, no sudden move, just the slow, careful build of something neither of us acknowledged aloud. Words about the weather began to sound like something else entirely, sentences that lingered in the air like they were meant to be unwrapped later. There were glances that stayed too long, the kind that reached beyond politeness into a place that felt more private. Sometimes it happened when passing tools over the fence, fingers brushing for a second too long. Sometimes it happened in the quiet pause after a shared laugh, where the eyes said more than the mouth dared to. It was in those moments the mind began to wander, replaying small details with a kind of hunger that felt both thrilling and dangerous. The way a voice dipped when speaking, the way the air seemed warmer when standing near, the way the simple act of being seen suddenly felt like the most intimate thing in the world. The change was subtle but unmistakable. The heart began to anticipate the sound of footsteps outside, the sight of a figure moving in the yard. There was a kind of magnetic pull in it, unplanned, uninvited, yet impossible to ignore. Each encounter seemed to draw us closer, as though the space between our homes had shrunk, the boundary fading into something that felt more like an invitation. And then came the moment that broke whatever fragile distance remained. A shared laugh at the fence turned into a pause, the kind of pause that begs to be filled. The air was still, but inside it there was heat. Eyes met, and this time neither of us looked away. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition. A knowing that whatever this was, it had already begun, and there was no going back. The first time it happened, it could have been dismissed as nothing. A brush of fingers while passing something across the fence, an accidental meeting of skin that should have been forgotten as quickly as it happened. But it wasn't. That fleeting contact left a trace, so slight, yet impossible to ignore. It lingered, replaying quietly in the mind, as if the skin itself remembered what the heart dared not say aloud. The next time was different. There was no mistake in it, no plausible reason to pretend it was unintentional. It was deliberate, a choice made in a moment when eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. Fingers didn't just touch, they stayed. They pressed lightly, testing the boundary, as though both were asking the same silent question. Would you let me? After that, the air changed. Every time there was a reason to be near, the space between seemed charged, as if the world had drawn an invisible circle around us where nothing else existed. Voices dropped lower, words came slower, breaths seemed heavier. The heart beat differently in those moments, not the steady rhythm of the everyday, but something faster, harder, alive. The first real touch came without thought. A hand reached to guide a step, to steady a movement, and instead of letting go, it stayed. The warmth of that contact was almost startling, as though the body had forgotten what it meant to feel wanted. There was no rush, no sudden leap forward, just the kind of stillness where neither wanted to pull away. Restraint began to crack in small, quiet ways, standing closer than necessary, letting eyes wander to the shape of a jaw, the curve of a mouth. Conversations that used to end quickly now lingered, neither willing to break whatever spell had taken hold. Even the silences were different, heavier, more intimate, filled with everything that wasn't being said. When the first kiss came, it felt like it had been waiting for years. There was no gentle testing of boundaries, no careful hesitation. It was the release of something that had been wound too tightly for too long. lips met with a hunger that made time irrelevant, hands finding their way without thought, guided only by need. Every breath after that was shallower, every heartbeat louder. Hands began to map the truth that words had been avoiding, learning the lines and shapes of another's body as though committing them to memory. There was nothing rushed about it, yet it burned. Each movement was deliberate, each touch carrying the weight of everything that had been building in silence. The world outside didn't matter anymore. The only reality was here, skin against skin, breath against breath, the undeniable pull of something that felt both dangerous and inevitable. It wasn't just desire, it was recognition, a knowing that what had begun could no longer be contained. When it finally broke, when restraint gave way completely, it wasn't the fall of something fragile. It was the opening of something that had been locked away, a surrender not just of the body, but of every guarded piece of the soul that had been waiting to be touched again. Every kiss carried a weight it hadn't held in years, a kind of trembling urgency that came from being starved of something vital for far too long. It was like the first drop of rain on dry earth, soaking in faster than it could be absorbed, awakening something that had been dormant. Each touch carried heat, not just on the skin, but deep inside, as if every cell had been waiting for this exact moment to remember how to feel. The warmth of skin against skin was more than physical. It was a connection that went deeper, a silent exchange that said, "I see you, I want you, I'm here." Fingers traced lines that had been untouched for years, relearning a body that had almost forgotten its own language. There was no rush, yet every moment seemed too short, every breath drawn between kisses almost reluctant to break the closeness. Bodies moved together as if they had always known how, falling into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. There was no thinking in it, no planning, only instinct and the pull of something too strong to resist. The sound of breath mingling in the air, the faint catch in the throat when pleasure sparked, the tightening of hands against warm skin, all wove together into something that felt bigger than the moment itself. There was power in the way each kiss deepened, each movement grew more certain, as if confidence was returning with every stolen second. It wasn't just passion, it was life rushing back into places that had been empty for too long. The heart no longer beat just to keep going, it beat because it was awake, because it had found a reason to. The body responded in ways that felt almost foreign at first, as if surprised by its own hunger, but soon there was no hesitation, only the need to give and to take, to lose and to be found. Every sigh, every shiver, every tightening grip was a confession in itself, speaking the words that neither dared to break aloud. And in those moments, the years without touch didn't matter. The hurt, the loneliness, the quiet ache, they were washed away in the heat of closeness, in the certainty of being wanted, in the truth of feeling alive again. It wasn't about replacing what had been lost. It was about discovering something entirely new, something that didn't have to be compared to the past because it was whole in its own right. The passion wasn't just in the way bodies moved, it was in the stillness between, the lingering after each kiss, the way eyes searched and found only desire looking back. It was the kind of intimacy that didn't need perfect words or carefully planned gestures. It needed only presence, only the raw and unguarded truth of being fully there, in that moment, with nothing held back. By the end, breath was ragged, hearts unsteady, and yet there was a quietness that felt almost sacred. The body rested, but the soul was alight, the kind of warmth that couldn't be dulled by time or distance. It was a return, a reawakening, the proof that passion could still bloom even in places that had once been barren, and in that truth, life began again. If this story stirred something deep inside you, you're not alone. There are more stories waiting, stories that will touch your heart, warm your skin, and remind you what it means to truly feel alive. Subscribe, stay close, and let's keep uncovering the moments that change everything. Your next heartbeat might just be the beginning of another story.